Early this month, a German man bought 3 full-page spreads in the New York Times newspaper in an attempt to educate Americans about the history of the West's interactions with the Muslim world. Dr Jurgen Todenhofer, who travelled to war-torn Iraq last year, argues that the central cause of terrorism is a long-held tradition of colonialism and neo-colonialism of Muslim countries, going back more than 200 years.
Dr Jurgen Todenhofer has spent much of his life studying law, practicing politics and travelling to hotspots in the Muslim world. He served as a member of the German parliament for almost 20 years and is currently an executive at a major European media group. But the reason he's been in the news lately is because earlier this month he took it upon himself to buy a 3-page advert in the New York Times discussing the history of Western interference in the Muslim world and the roots of terrorism. Quite an expensive endeavour. He says he wants to present the world to Westerners from the point of view of a Muslim for a change, to open a window into seeing the Muslim world from a fresh perspective, an effort to open a fair discussion about why there's so much anger and resentment towards the West. Dr Todenhofer's work didn't begin this month. He's travelled extensively in both Iraq and Afghanistan over several decades, meeting those fighting against occupying armies and documenting his findings in books and papers. His writing often flies in the face of what many in the West hold as a world view, and his office tells us he often receives hate mail for it. His detractors have accused his work of being one-sided and entirely blaming the West for the Muslim world's perils, but omitting mention of mistakes and aggression on the other side. Some even go as far as calling him an appeaser for terrorism. But Dr Todenhofer argues that terrorists in an Islamic disguise are murderers, but the same holds true for what he calls ringleaders disguised as Christians, who wage wars of aggression in contravention of international law. His supporters say that his piece in the New York Times is an attempt at placing the claim that Islam is a religion of hate into the context of history and world politics. And his conclusions include advice to Muslims that they must commit to progress and tolerance, like the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him.
Well, earlier on, Hassan Ghani met with Dr Jurgen Todenhofer, who flew to London to speak with Islam Channel News. Here's what he had to say.
Now, in your piece in the New York Times, you say that in the last 200 years, no Muslim state has ever attacked a Western state. But isn't that just a result of geopolitical factors? Isn't that down to the fact that the West has, in that period, raced ahead in terms of technology and military might, and has preempted, or at least it claims that it has preempted any attacks from Muslim states on it? Isn't it because of that rather than perhaps goodwill on behalf of Muslims?
Could be. I wouldn't say that the goodwill of the Muslims is better than the goodwill on our side, but I think it's a fantastic propaganda, a fantastic performance of propaganda to explain to the world that the violence of the Muslim world is the biggest danger in this world. If you see history, you just realize what you said, that no Muslim country has ever attacked during the last 200 years a Western country. You see that never a Muslim country has tried to colonize another country during the last 200 years. The Western countries, included my country, Germany, have killed 50 million people in Africa and in Asia during the times of colonization. They started terrible wars, the First World War and the Second World War, which cost 70 million deaths. No Muslim participated in this war, and there was no Muslim who killed the Jews during the time of the Nazis in Germany. And for example, you take the figures of our time, Al-Qaeda, and for me Al-Qaeda is a terrorist organization, a murder organization. They are not freedom fighters or martyrs or mujahideen. For me, they are murderers. But Al-Qaeda has killed 5,000 Western civilians. That's a lot. I've spoken with members of the families who died in the World Trade Center, and these were terrible tragedies. And therefore, Al-Qaeda is a murder gang for me. But I must say also that the American president has killed in Iraq not only 5,000 civilians, but hundreds of thousands of civilians. And I think we must realize that, and we must realize that it's a fantastic piece of propaganda that the Western countries say now the problem of our time is the violence of Muslim countries.
Isn't there a major difference there in moral terms, though? When Al-Qaeda killed 5,000 people in the World Trade Center, they were deliberately targeting civilians, whereas when the US Army goes into Iraq, the civilian death toll is as a result of mistakes or crossfire, but they aren't, or at least we're told that civilians aren't deliberately targeted.
You know, I was a judge in younger times, and if you throw a bomb, you know exactly that this bomb could also kill civilians. And if you accept silently that your bomb could kill civilians, then you're responsible for that. And if I go now out in the street here in London, and if I would throw a bomb to a policeman and this policeman is surrounded by civilians, I cannot say I didn't want to kill these civilians. I accepted it to kill them. And all those pilots, I was a pilot in younger days too, and all those pilots who throw bombs know and accept that they can kill and that they will kill with their bombs civilians. And a part of that, the story that I tell in my book, these Iraqis that I met, their brothers were killed by snipers, and snipers know exactly that they are killing civilians. And for an Iraqi girl, there is no difference if it loses her leg or if she is killed by an American bomb or by an Al-Qaeda suicide bomber.